couple weeks ago, my wife and I took a trip to Austin, and we spent a good night at a restaurant, and we actually went to a UT basketball game. They barely won. Oh, that's okay. And so anyway, so we were leaving the game, and we got on I-35. It's dark. There's some traffic after the basketball game, and I felt a bump in the road, and then all of a sudden, my tire is flat. And so I'm trying to pull over off the side of the road, and there's not much room on I-35 going through Austin. And so I decide, well, there's an exit right away. I know that's a bad idea, but we were able to get off the exit. I parked, and so I got out of my truck, and I decided I'm going to change the tire. I put the brake on, and after I put the brake on, I went over to the tire, and I got underneath my vehicle. I started pumping my jack up, and I noticed that my jack was not long enough for my tire. So I thought, okay, well, I am kind of at a downhill incline, so maybe the back part of my truck is raising up. And so Tara and I were like, we're thinking together, we're collaborating together, and so we have this idea that we'll turn the truck around and go uphill so the weight is on the back part. So I get out, and once again, I redo the thing, put the jack up on the tire, and still, it's too short. So Tara and I are thinking, okay, what do we do now? We have an option. We can call somebody, but that's dumb, right? Why would you call somebody in the middle of the night to help fix your flat tire on I-35 in Austin? We're going to do this ourselves. And so we found a rock, and we put the rock on top of the jack, and I got the rock just wedged perfectly. I lifted up and my wife's sitting back there, what are you doing? And the tire comes off the ground, victory. So I get around the tire, and I'm ready to loosen up the tire, and I forgot one important thing. I forgot to loosen up the lug nuts before I lifted up the tire. And it's already kind of wiggling because of the rocks. I thought this was a terrible idea. So I went back under the truck, lowered the truck, unloosened the lug nuts, raised it back up, finally got the tire off with the kind of wobbling with the rock, got the new tire on, and put the spare tire in the back of the flat tire in the back of the truck, finally lowered it down. We got the tire ready to go, head off. I heard dragging under the ground. I'm like, what's that sound? Pulled off. I forgot to raise this little wiry thing that lifts up the spare tire. Had to lift that thing up. Finally get to where we were staying 3 hours later. YouTube made it so simple, right? Simple message, and yet not that easy. In Ephesians, we hear this radical, profound, simple message where God saves, where God redeems, and God lives in us. You can put this on YouTube. You can put this on podcasts. You can put this on Facebook, and with this story, you're going to get tons of likes and smiley faces. You're going to get those hearts. See, Ephesians 2 describes God's saving presence as a gift. It is nothing you can earn. It is nothing that you deserve. In fact, God has removed all these walls so that God can take residence in us. So Jesus meets us where we are. He saves us and he transforms us. Seems simple enough. And then we get to living. And it's like changing a tire on I-35. It's simple. Maybe it's not that easy. Being a disciple of Jesus Christ. So being a disciple of Jesus Christ and participating in church and in God's kingdom, it takes work. And at times that work seems overwhelming, or it might seem like it's too much. And Paul says, do not lose hope, though. Don't lose hope on the work. Look, you've been saved. But you might be a spiritual infant. Now, the cool thing is, Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, when he brings up this idea of spiritual infancy, he does say, we are spiritual infants. So it's kind of nice to know that the Apostle Paul himself is a spiritual infant that needs to grow more into maturity, into the likeness of Jesus Christ. That at least makes me feel good. But let's say if Paul is a 5-year-old spiritual infant, I'm hoping I'm a 3-week-old? So life with God calls us, right, to step out of this cradle and begin to walk with God. Verse 14 says that we are no longer children, and no, we're not tossed to and fro. We're not blown about by every wind. Some of our English translations softened this up a little bit, so nothing against you New American Standard Bible people or NIV, it just doesn't do a good job. Some others do. It should be saying, it's not like, well, we used to be, but now we are. What it should be saying is, we must, from this point on, no longer be infants. It's a point that Paul is trying to make. N.T. Wright says that Ephesians, the entire letter, can be summed up in 2 words. 2 words. Grow up. Grow up. Grow individually, grow as a local faith community, and grow up as the church universal. Grow together in the likeness of God. And so this morning, I want to spend our time talking about this journey from spiritual infancy to spiritual adulthood. Now, you have to know I love infants. We, in fact, have a baby blessing March the 5th that I'd love for you all to be there and witness. So babies are great, right? But let's be honest, we like babies to not be babies. Babies are overly dependent on others. They cannot control their bowel movements. It's hard to know when they're hungry or when they're tired or they just need to be held, right? So there's differences between spiritual babies and regular babies, right? But at least the idea is understanding which is we love babies. They're new. They're great. But they need to grow up. Paul says a spiritual infant lacks spiritual direction and understanding. Let me clarify that. This is an evil world. There is sin. There are powers that are destructive and divisive and hurtful. So in the last part of verse 14, it says these spiritual infants, they lack direction. They're tossed back and forth. They're blown by these winds of doctrine and trickiness and craftiness and deceitful scheming. And Paul says the opposite of craftiness and trickiness and deceitful scheming, the opposite of this is to speak truth in love. That's the opposite, to speak truth in love. And so I'm struggling with this because, well, if that's the opposite, then spiritual infants who lack understanding and spiritual direction, spiritual infants, these are quick to react. They can't admit when they're wrong. They're unable to receive criticisms. They're defensive. They always have to be right. That is spiritual infancy. I asked Ryan Simmons if he would help me this morning. I didn't ask Roger or Amy, so I apologize. Come here, Ryan. Come on up. So, truth from God is sacred. It's pure. It's filling. It's awesome, right? John 4 talks about it as living water. And then later on, with the woman on the well, it talks about worshiping in spirit and in truth. So truth is a lot like this cup of water. So would you hold on to the truth that God has given you, right? So hold on to 2 hands. So what happens, though, if you're new at this whole truth thing and life starts doing this to you, right? Right? So water, he's trying everything he can, so I'm just going to dump him, right? So what happened, Ryan? It got you wet. right? It's splashed all over, not all over. You did really good, so I'm thankful for that. You a little bit on the carpet there. Thanks. Give me a hand. I'm going to drink this water. I'm thirsty. This is good truth. So imagine with me, you have this pure life, this transformative life that we call truth. And then you are tossed to and fro. The deceitful schemer goes at you and you're pushed back and forth, and the water begins to spill out. So let me give you an example. We have spilled water. We have spilled lots of water over racism. Lots of water. This is a letter from elders of the 12th Avenue Church of Christ, May 8th of 1953. And I'm going to use the word black or blacks because I'm trying not to be offensive. Dear Brother Burton, it has been brought to our attention that you have intentions of purchasing the St. Cecilia Academy property for the purpose of using it as a school for blacks. As elders of this congregation and residents of this community, we view this with concern. The use of this property as a center for blacks? There are 5 white congregations of the Churches of Christ in this vicinity. We feel that our congregation and also the others would be crippled in the short time because of the loss of much of our present membership and the hostility of the public to the Church of Christ if blacks were able to establish a school. This is probably my favorite. We want you to understand that our opposition is not personal. We would oppose the present owners of any successors thereto if they should attempt the establishment of a black project. Look, I'm not picking on 1953 white Churches of Christ in Nashville, Tennessee. And I feel we've gone a good road on racism. But we must think through and continue to grow in issues like racism. We cannot allow ourselves to be tossed to and fro, to be pushed around as the world becomes divisive and destructive on things that are so true and simple to the nature of Jesus Christ. And we become pushed back and forth and allow the world to shape our understanding of how God views people. I feel every time we talk about truth in church, we feel there needs to be a hard edge to it. You know what I mean? Truth hurts. And I'm sorry you can't handle the truth. It's for your own good. If Mick would only preach more truth. See, I would argue that on the outside, as Christians, we are called to be soft, genuine, and engaging. But I do agree that on the inside, at our core, at the foundation of who we are, we should have an edge about ourselves, a deep, resonating truth of Jesus Christ. But here's the edge of truth. Before you listen, before you speak real truth into your own life or into the lives of others, I ask you to take a long look at the suffering Jesus on the cross. Stare at that Jesus until it makes you feel uncomfortable. Hear passages like 1 John 3:16 that says, "You will know my love by how I sacrifice myself to others." Stare long at the suffering Jesus and ask yourself, how will this truth be revealed shape me? How will I suffer for it? How will it help the world? How do I sacrifice myself? As Paul says in Ephesians chapter 4, we speak truth in love. We are people of love. In fact, In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it says that this is the greatest gift, is that we are people of love. And the cool thing is all people can actually use this gift. It's accessible. It's simple. It's not always easy. Spiritual infants are also consumed with the self. They like to focus on themselves. Spiritual infants do. Early in chapter 4, Paul says, "Be completely humble, gentle, and patient, bearing with one another in love." You see, spiritual infants, they have a hard time sharing, right? They don't like to share with others, be open to others. They're unyielding. Spiritual infants who focus on self, they're quick to judge and slow to forgive, willing to divide and break things up when they feel offended. Feelings are hurt easily, right? Spiritual infancy is about protecting the self. It's about protecting the self. And there's this obsession with their own image. Do you notice that in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 13, when talking about infants, it's in the plural form? So more than one. But when it talks about the body of Christ, it's in the singular form. So the church, when we say church, we're thinking singular, not a bunch of infants running around, plural, right? And this is something that Duncan emphasized last week. Thank you, by the way. That we are one. We are one. And so if we are one by nature, we can no longer think of ourself. We must think of others. And Paul does not underestimate the power of local churches and how they should be inviting all people to use their gifts for the single purpose, for the one purpose of Jesus' ministry. I would even add that Paul is also saying we especially have to be open and mindful of folks that are often quieted or unheard or ignored in God's local churches. You see, Paul brings up all stars of the church in Ephesians chapter 4. He brings them up, the good ones, the ones we like, the ones we want to hear, the ones we want to see. He says, like the apostles. How many of you are willing to raise your hand that you are an apostle? Like the prophets. How many of you are willing to raise your hand that you are a prophet? Like the evangelists and the pastors and the teachers. But what you notice is Paul brings up these big named type of jobs, and this is what he says. You all-stars, your job is to invite everyone else to discover their gifts. Equip them to live out their ministry. Connect them to the body of Christ. Apostles, equip others. Pastors, equip others. Prophets, equip others. Preachers, equip others. Elders, equip others. Connect people to the life of Jesus Christ. That is our calling. And I want to be honest with you, that is a recent commitment of our church leadership here at the New Braunfels Church of Christ. That we are committing ourselves and recognizing that God has given each of you a gift. And I can't look at all of you right now, but I'm trying. Right? I noticed some of you kind of turned away when I went in your area. That's okay, I get it. Where we grow together to be Christ's body. Here's the whole full result, that a wide range of folks are living in genuine and real authentic community, that they're using their God-given gifts for the sake of a higher calling. I assure you that this type of church is highly contagious in a world that is suffering and starving for connection, for real relationships. Ephesians 4, 7 through 12, it says that the power of Jesus, which will eventually heal the world physically, spiritually, socially, is now given over to us. That power has been given over to us. Every Christian is in ministry through the church. We all are in ministry. And so none of us are merely consumer of services. Everyone is a distributor and offers the world the powerful good news of Jesus Christ. So part of a journey, this spiritual journey from infancy to maturity, is to create a place where we're not simply attending or spectating, but fully participating. Being one big, happy, yet dysfunctional family.